I'll start my second meeting of the evening. Welcome to our planning meeting, and I think the first item will be apologies for absence, which come from Councillor Fuller alone, yep. I think.
Yep.
Do we accept Councillor Fuller's apologies?
Yes.
Yes. Right. The second item is representations from interested parties, and I believe we have an interested party. I think you want to talk to us about Cotterstock Road.
Yes.
In which case, wherever you're most comfortable, as long as you can come and talk to us so that we can all hear what you've got to say.
I'm Nigel Reid. This is Kerry Whitby with the Labour. I have 2 minutes, is that right?
We can sometimes be a little flexible, but
if it's riveting or exciting,
keep it reasonably brief.
Right this out. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you. My name is Nigel Reid. I've lived on Cotterstock Road for 30 years in the same house opposite Pembroke House. There's an old saying that you can't get a quart into a pint pot, and that's what I think about this proposed development. The building that's being proposed is by any stretch of the imagination huge. It is 6.8 times the floor area as a current house. And bear in mind, Pembroke House is itself large. It's a 7-bedroom house. If you look at it slightly differently in terms of total site coverage, including the house and the car park, then the total, what they call impermeable area, goes up by about 6.5-fold, and will cover something in the order of about 70 to 80% of the total plot. So it's big by any stretch of the imagination. It would dominate that part of the street, and in particular, it would dominate the entry to the town as you come in Cotterstock Road. If you bear in mind, I presume you all know where it is, you can look down at the left-hand end. And the way that the house, the care home would be set up, would be that it would be well forward of the house to the north, that's 19A. So if you come round the bend, what you will see will be this mass of the building, and it's so far forward, you will actually see the side of the home, which is going to be bank building. And you'll have a particularly good view of it, because the 2 large beech trees that currently in front of Pembroke House would have been pulled down. And that for me is one of the more outrageous aspects of the development, in that basically all mature vegetation and these 2 large mature beech trees, each of them the best part of 30 metres, need to be pulled down in order to get this home on site. The root issue to me seems that we all understand about economies of scale. For example, when you build a care home, you've got to have a minimum size to it. It's just that the site is so small that getting what they regard as the minimum, it just doesn't fit. So having pulled down all the vegetation and the beech trees to build the large home, that isn't really quite enough, because of course what you need is a car park. And I'm aware that you had a meeting about this application before and commented on the car park space. You asked for more car park space, they're providing more. But if my reading is correct, it is still below the minimum guidelines that Northamptonshire Council require. You'll also be aware that one of the major bugbears at the moment in Cotterstock Road and one or 2 other roads is the parking and congestion and the consequent pollution that there is around school starting and finishing time. How on earth that's going to be helped by having an undersized car park and all the additional traffic that will be coming into the care home is beyond me. But I think actually the more critical issue in terms of safety is going to be the access. This site is going to have one single access that is on a bend, on the zebra crossing zigzag, which is only barely 10 metres to the south. There's important to remember when Pembroke House was actually lived in. And whilst anybody lived in it, that house always had two entrances. There was an entrance to the north of the current one, and it had a swing through, sort of like a dry, so you could go in one and out of the other. So cars didn't have to turn around on the grounds of the house, and they could choose which one was best to come out of. So it had two entrances, and there wasn't a zebra crossing. You're now going to have a big careful with at least a couple of 100 comings and goings a day into this site. And it's going to be, for a lot of traffic, a right turn. We all know that in terms of road safety, the worst issues are when you're turning across traffic. And there is one diagram that I think is particularly telling, and that is in where it shows a dust cart. I'll give you the reference number in the pack. You may be familiar with it. It's basically, sorry if you can't see it, you probably, yes, it's this diagram here, which is P14 Division A. And what this actually shows is that this is a dust cart that applied to any large vehicle. You can't get into the site, and it doesn't matter whether you're coming from the north or the south, and you can't get out of the site either way without transgressing onto the opposite carriageway. So a lorry cannot get up, go north, up to the site, turn right. It shows here it has to actually swing within the carriageway, it has to go onto the opposite, in order to get the arc round to get into this car park, this undersized car park. So unless everything is perfectly parked in this car park, you won't be able to do a 3-point turn to get out. And whatever he does there, the chances of that, so if anybody's coming out, or the minibus is in, or an ambulance is there, or a white van delivery is there, all that's going to happen is the lorry's going to get stuck across the road, and you're going to end up with vehicles reversing out onto this. And I think that's going to be really quite important. Cars coming out, so there's going to be a couple of hundred ins or outs a day, then it's tricky enough for people nearly on this road anyway with the right hand now, because there's a traffic comes in. So that to me is really one of the major issues. Finally, it will of course be a changing class of building type, and you will know much more about such things as me, but I think there must be a danger of a precedent there that what is now essentially, and has been, certainly while I've been there the last 30 years, totally residential area, its nature could actually be potentially changed by a change of class, which would enable other developments to come. And that really is the main points I wish to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. And give us some food for thought for the application, which I think is a second on our list. But before we get to those, we do have the more formalities to deal with. The first of which is to deal with any interest to declare, and the first of those is anybody with any disclosable pecuniary interest. No. And any other interests? No. That brings us on to the minutes of the last planning meeting held here on the 6th of November.
Happy to propose them.
Proposed by Councillor Oakes N, seconded by just about everybody. I think Councillor Robinson just about got his hand up first. So proposed, seconded, all those who were present in favour, which is fine. Bear with me a second. takes us on to the planning applications themselves, and I think the first one is 96 West Street.
I'll try and rattle through that so that these good people can go along their way. And by the way, I had a feeling that you would say what you were going to say, so I've not gone into any, tremendous amount of detail about the planning. Okay, so just as a bit of levity, as we're coming up to Christmas, planning applications, here we go, and there it goes. We're stocking them up. Should some get the boot? Sorry about that, but need a bit of levity. This is really quite complex. Just to remind you that this is the property. It sits on the end there, and I'll just run through it. That's what it looked like. Bit of a mess, really. Dale ends or up the Swanee. Interestingly, these are the interesting bits. It was the wagon and horses previously known, and but it's been uninhabited since 1998, and has always looked a mess down there. And the people who are actually developing it are trying to make a home out of it, which I can't see that we could feel any objection to. Right, current interior, you've only got to look at the mess in there. Planning proposals, here, there and everywhere. If you want to stop on any of these, I'll tell you, I'm happy to do so. But basically, the people are trying to turn it into a proper habitable building. They're doing so, in my opinion, in a very sympathetic manner. Conclusions, that's mine. And our conservation officer seems to have no real objection to it. Lloyd seems to be quite happy, so.
Well, once again, very inevitably comes into mind about parking. I mean, if it's a 3-bedroom house, are they turning it into?
Pass. Yes. But the point is that I don't think we could have an objection about parking, really. I mean, it's been turned from an uninhabitable mess into a habitable property. Let's just go back and see if I can find where am I? Let's have a look and we'll see about that.
I'm a bit confused. What's the difference between this now and when we spoke about it about 2 months ago?
I was just going to say.
Well, I was going to make the point that this has been before us in a different version, as I recall
They've
it.
enlarged the petition inside, and there's been some other minor changes. I actually rang the architects to say, I'm struggling to see exactly what extra you're sticking in there, but sadly I've had no response. I went through both applications, and I can tell you, I had a blooming hour job to try to work out what additional changes were. It appears to be they are largely interior. They want to enlarge a petition wall, from what I could gather. I don't know what else to say about it. Parking is an interesting issue, always has been in Oundle. But
Can you recall what our comments were on the original application?
It was about being sympathetic, and I think we made a point of saying that we'd quite like that dovecot, that detail.
Yep,
Yeah, that ought to be
original feature.
And that
Yeah.
artist impression didn't show that, it showed a flat
It
wall
didn't.
on the end.
No, but I believe that's been handled.
So I think we might want to simply restate that. We'd obviously want to make the usual noises about
Subject to
views of the
conservation
conservation officer. I don't believe that when we looked at this last time we did express a concern around the inevitable results of turning an uninhabitable property into a habitable one, which is that people are therefore going to live in it and visit it, which almost certainly is going to add to the traffic issues in West Street. There isn't any capability for any on-street parking. Sorry, off-street parking is what I'm trying to say.
The actual other bit to it that goes around the corner, the other part of the pub, they've got parking at the back. So I don't know whether that, did it say anything on the application that
No.
they've got parking?
No.
Because they park, I know
No.
the two people that live there and they've got 2 cars and they always park down the back
Right.
of that
But I
property.
think that land belongs either to the people in the, what was the wagon and horses, or to
The ones that built that
the
new
ones
house at
that
the
built the
back.
house behind. I don't think there's any
No.
land with this
With
cottage.
this property. No, that's
But
what I thought.
it's got to be a house. It is a house.
But it's impossible to
And they
actually...
would just have to park in the street round the Jesus Church or wherever on
Well,
public parking spaces.
The point is, though, it's the same as we've always seen, is that it's impossible
Yeah.
suddenly to provide parking facilities just like that in our town. You just can't do it. And this is probably a blooming good example. If you did, you might actually ruin the aspect and the street scene of the property itself. I mean, there's probably room enough for them to dig out the front garden and, you know, stick a car place in there.
There's room there, and that's what I'm drawing for a car.
Well, I think that's arguable.
No, it's access, that
I-
bit at the side is
I-
access to the other houses, isn't
No,
it?
can I just say, I'm sure that our deputy clerk would know more about this than most of us, because you live just down the road.
Yeah.
What would you say, is there any possible parking opportunity?
Well, we just used to park around the Jesus Church, and in the 17 years we were there, we didn't have any issues. It would be another, say for instance, it's a family, 2 cars,
Another 2
maybe even
cars.
3 if they've got a teenager. So
But
Oh, crikey, we've
might
got,
just as easily be somebody who doesn't have any
drive,
children
absolutely.
at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
we've got people living up our road now who've got 5 cars. That
I
seems to
think
be
it
the
probably
nature.
comes
I
down
don't
to
think
this,
it can
doesn't
be
it?
an issue.
I-
It's
I-
not
we-
even
we-
worth
We have a property that is not in a good state, that is not in any kind of beneficial use, that could be, and that's the positive.
Yeah.
And the possible downside is whether it might aggravate the parking situation, and I think we simply have to balance the one against the other and come to a view.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I think I'd rather see the property sympathetically
Yeah.
restored
No,
Yeah.
than worry about the possible issues arising from a
Yeah.
car or possibly 2 cars having to find somewhere to park.
Yeah.
Subject to the points we already made about the view of the conservation officer to what's proposed and to the retaining of the feature that we'd already made a comment on. Does anybody really demur from that, or is this parking issue such that
Well, I
we want to
I don't think it's
to
even an
object on
issue
that basis? Because
No, it's a right
it's an
thing to
old-
raise as an issue, but you look at the property and it does not offer any opportunities for parking on site.
Because it's in a conservation area.
We'll just
I mean,
approve it.
I think one of the things we have to be mindful of always in these planning applications is trying to future-proof the town as much as possible.
Yeah.
And they could all very well be a single person quite happily living there, but they could sell it for twice as much as they pay for it, and you know it just becomes another £1 million house on the corner of Oundle with no parking.
Yeah.
And, you know that's the knock-on from that
Yeah.
in 20 years' time, or 15 years' time.
Okay.
Well, all I can say is I think that's us facing with every single property in the town.
well, it's certainly probably the case for the considerable number of properties in that particular street in town.
Certainly.
I think we've dealt with
But
this.
it's not the only
Yeah.
one. Right. I don't hear anybody saying that we should actually object. We have noted the issue around parking, but I'm not sure that it can really be part of our response. Because there's nothing you can do about it. So I think the response simply has to be limited to the observations.
Chair, I
previously made.
think we should probably make an observation about the parking issue. That would be just an observation, not an objection. Maybe just to register our concern about it. Frankly, looking at the site, I cannot see that there's much you can do about it.
That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you flag up a concern about parking that is in fact insoluble, what are you actually saying?
Exactly.
I think you've either got to say we can't do what
Yeah.
you want because you can't park.
But there is enough room in the front garden, for example, for them to put in a run-in for a car. But then all of a sudden you're starting to transform the landscape.
Yeah.
And that's the big blooming problem. There is enough room in the front garden, probably to get 2 cars in. I've been on.
But is your observation, Councillor Oakes, that we should make a comment that actually what we don't want to see is parking in the front garden?
I would be happy
Because I think that might
Yes.
impact.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that would come up against Conservation Officer's report. I think if you're not the original ordinance, I did turn it to a car park. I think that would
If you just make a more general comment about conserving the actual view of the
Yes.
property, because that's what we're
Yeah.
saying.
That's what I'm trying to say, really.
Okay, well I think we can
Lloyd
probably...
will have a pretty strong view
Yeah.
about that.
I'm sure he would. I think we probably will say that we feel the need to conserve the frontage,
Yeah,
which would mean that there couldn't be parking at the front,
yeah.
and we accept that therefore parking would have to be on street. Right,
Okay.
I think we've done that one possibly today,
Right.
certainly thoroughly, which brings us on to 19 Cotterstock Road.
Right.
Now we've heard Mr Reed's comments. We probably were, I suspect we were all present when we had the presentation from the prospective developers pre their application going in. I think you said that you haven't put together anything substantial, but is there anything that you want to show us on screen?
Not really. Can I just say, in anticipation of what the gentleman said, I've not put anything up about this, because the issue is not about the design of this, or anything other. It's about its location. The fact that it sits opposite the school. There's all sorts of things which are just general, like access and this, that and the other. Now, I can put up the plans. I think that's pointless, personally. So I don't intend to do that this evening. I'd be quite happy to go into some detail about it. But we've had concerns about parking space. We know that Bellamy Road is going to be, hit big time, probably even Lime Avenue and other places because of the daily traffic that goes to the school. Now, one of the interesting things about the application is that if you look on the left, you'll see that they've delineated the situation of the site. What they haven't done is stuck in the school. Now, that's a bit naughty, really, in my opinion. The school's got an enormous impact upon this, quite apart from all the other eloquent points that you've made, which, frankly, I couldn't improve on.
We did, in fact, when we were given the presentation, many of the factors brought up, which I agree you've done very eloquently. They were brought up and as objections by us to the development, as what we said, and I still stand by those. We could quite happily get TPOs put on the beaches, for example, stop them being felled and removed. that would be something we could do. The parking, the zebra crossing, the school, the speed of people that approach that corner from Cottesloe Road
Yep.
have already been noted by us, and the amount of, and we have sort of little minor surveys of our own, I mean, in particular, of both sides of the school side, when it's gridlocked
Yes.
on certain times of day.
Yeah.
On the rear, Rockingham Hills entrance,
Oh, that's
on the other side of the road,
Yeah.
and this
Different
entrance,
side.
where, and it can only make that, can only make it worse. I mean, I think we have also commented on the fact that the car parking at that of the site is a major problem, with the amount of shift changes, staff shift changes, everything else that the site would
Of
entail.
course, it's 24-hour care. You have to have both sets of shifts on at the same time, because you can't just walk out before the next one.
And I
We
can
made
remember
that point.
those points were made at the time, so you have my absolute sympathy. That's what I mean.
Does anybody else have either anything additional or contrary to add?
Well, the question I've got is Nigel mentioned the number of parking spaces have been increased. Have we seen that in the revised application? Have we been informed of that?
The application went in. When it first came to you, I think it had 16.
And they increased
Yeah.
it to 22.
And they increased it to 22. And what they did, they effectively, from the first time, moved it
Just further towards it.
basically just a bit further away from the road and tucked it in.
Yeah.
As I understand it and reading the comments that are on the East outside, then the version submitted is still lower than the requirement.
Some of us around this table have been here long enough to recall that that site had a planning application some years ago for 3 quite large houses,
Yes.
retaining the original in and out entrance and exits.
Yeah.
I
Chair,
think
You're right.
Chair, may I just say, also there's the issue of the possible development further up the road, which will make matters even worse. Dare I point that out?
it is fair to say that if the district local plan was to go ahead as is currently envisaged,
Yep.
there would be an extra 130 dwellings
Yeah.
just beyond this site, or not far beyond this site,
Just down to the
all
beach.
of which apparently would be coming out onto Cotterstock Road, since they didn't appear to have made any provision for it to come out onto the lower part through St Peter's
They
Road,
haven't.
as things currently stand. However, I think personally, I think there are enough access issues around this site, regardless, as it were, of the exacerbation that would be caused by that further development. I mean, there are going to be quite a number of movements. Having a single entrance and exit seems ridiculous, particularly when there was scope for 2 in the first place. I think the big question is whether or not that site could take, if not this scale of development, some scaled down version of that development, or whether it is frankly more suited to remaining a residential development along the lines of the previous planning application some years ago. Because it is clearly an entirely residential area if you exclude the school on the other side, but of course you can't exclude the school from the point of view of your access issues and safety issues. Does anybody actually think that this is a good idea in terms of what it is and where it is?
Yeah, this is a complicated balancing act here, because I don't think there's any, you can't think that this of itself itself would not be suitable for the people who live in Handle, who are getting older and are going to need care facility. So that's the other bit, isn't it? I try to look at this as best I can, but this is a planning application. But I've got to say that there is a point to make that this is possibly a much needed facility. We've got Abbott House, and well, I don't know what else to say about it. Parson Latham, I suppose you include, but it appears to be that this is the sort of thing that we're going to be increasingly faced with, is providing this facility.
That suggests that our response may begin along the lines of, whilst we recognise the need for a facility of this type within Oundle, nevertheless, this is not the optimum site for such a development because of access issues, lack of parking on site, possible overdevelopment of the site, loss of some of the trees on the site. I mean, there are a whole raft of things to which we might address our minds, and I don't think we should leave any of them out in terms of our response. If anybody thinks I did just leave anything out, please let me know.
Well, the proposed development, the zebra crossings and everything else that you've said, and they all need to be listed, and they are very, very pertinent points. And I can't, I can't see it working.
Right. I think it's clear we object, and I think we've sort of articulated a number of reasons for that, and perhaps Lisa and I can work on exactly how we word that.
Yeah. So principally on the parkings for me, that if you've got two shifts, you've got a shift change, and there's no public transport by there, so you can assume that the majority of staff will be coming in by car. Yeah, therefore their parking facilities have to cope with the cars from two shifts of their employees, and I think there were about 23 or 24 people per shift. You know, so they needed parking space for around 50 cars, not the 22 that they're proposing. There's no availability of street parking there, so you can't even use that. So parking is a big issue for a development of that size.
And they would be permanently parked, because people, the staffing change couldn't be, if it was complicated to get in the parking, then they won't park there, they'll park along the street.
Yeah,
And
leave them there all day.
other street
And
is
it's the same
available.
streets and everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Can I just make the point then that are we saying we don't like this at all, or are we saying it's too big and you need an awful lot more car parking spaces and then in and out? So I'm a bit torn about this, because clearly it's the kind of facility that would be appropriate in this town. So are we saying it's just too big, or are we saying we don't like it at all?
I think what we're saying is that the site itself, unfortunately, doesn't lend itself to the size and scale of the development proposed.
Yes.
Councillor Chesser.
Can I
Do, please.
Just in terms of what we were told at the meeting, was that in terms of their other homes, this is a small home.
yeah.
And they originally asked for 45 beds. And we said, but it's too tight. And in fact, it's Kerry's husband asked, well, you know, what's your bottom line on this? And said, well, anything less than 40 beds just doesn't work. And I'm familiar with the industry, and the normal average size of a new home would be 60 beds and up these days. It's just economies of scale. You just can't operate it this small.
Councillor Chesser.
I'm also thinking, though, if something like this, I'm not saying this, because I have big reservations, particularly about the access, but what else would happen on that site? There would be houses built on it.
Yep.
We would still have an access problem going on here.
but not on
We
the
have
same
to be
scale.
not on the same scale, but there would be something.
Yeah, no, I
Vehicles
agree.
coming in
And
and
there would-
out. We've also got the fact that the school, of course, the county council have the strip along the road, which they are planning to develop.
which they would like to develop.
Well, that's another one, isn't it?
Yeah. However, I don't think it's potentially tricky, isn't it, to object to this application on the basis there might be another application.
Well, but you yourself raised it.
Yeah, I've raised it.
You did,
In terms
just 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, in terms of the other thing. The difference, in a sense, being that it is actually currently in what is the development plan for the area, so it is a slightly different scenario.
Exactly.
But,
Yeah.
right, well, I think we've got a fairly comprehensive list of objections to this, even if we might say that a facility of this type might well be beneficial for the town, but they've really got to find a better location for it from the sound of it, in order to do it. Right, let us move on again.
Be careful.
We'll keep that for
The
you.
rest of it is
I would
just
be
boring.
Yes,
So you must come up to us again, saying we need it.
yes.
It's always nice to see.
When you come
Yeah,
to
Although
no,
there is another
interesting.
site which we proposed
You
earlier,
really do. So thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, bye-bye.
because it's not just, well, if you recall, the others. Councillor Chester just raised a point, which is that if we displace this proposal to somewhere else, he was rather concerned that one possible location for it might be Fletton Field. And I recall, quite apart from that issue, that at an earlier stage of the development of our neighbourhood plan, the people who were interested in developing the Cottesloe Road, St Peter's Road site talked about putting a care home as part of that development.
Yeah.
However, that's only displacing the thing a little bit further along the road, and I'm not entirely convinced that most of the arguments we've just raised wouldn't have applied equally to that.
I do think it's important, and I think we brought it up before, not only full council meetings, but these meetings, that we should throw these things at the developers more and demand through these things, because they're going to make money on this. This is all about money. It's all about scales and everything else. It's a profit-making concern. I mean, they're a big business, these companies, and they do this, and that's what they do. The town does need it, and I agree totally. You know, we've got to bend over, but I think it should be something that's thrown back through to the developers. Find other sites for it. I really still think this is an inappropriate place.
Right. I think we've probably covered as much as we can cover on that. Let us move on to 2 Church Street and something which is probably likely to be a little less controversial.
I'm going to say, I possibly mucked this up a bit because I had a bit of a problem with shifting the slides around. I'm now going to go to 143 Gladthorne Road.
Okay, fine, we'll do 143 Blackthorn Road.
Okay, right, there it is. Bits and pieces. And that's it. I really, frankly, there's nothing much to say. It's, you know, very much you can see where the blue bit is. I mean, I could build anything down there and nobody would see it. So, well, perhaps I'm being a bit cynical. I can't see a problem with this single story, utility. It's not going to be imposing. I don't know what else to say.
I'm struggling to find out where it is. Where is it?
That's Blackthorne Road, and then it's an entrance off Blackthorne Road. Rather than talk about Thorne Road.
Oh right, okay. Yeah, I'm with you now.
Sorry,
in my head, I'm trying to figure out where it is on the
Yeah,
road.
it's not fronting the street.
No,
Yeah,
it's on the way out of town.
Yeah.
Let's put it like that. And it's not from.
Yeah, I'm trying to place it, and I know where it is now. Yes.
I looked at this and thought, well, this is a no, forget it.
Well, just on my old favourites of car parking, single storey extension, where is it going? At the back of the house or the front?
Well, I don't think it really matters, it's plenty
Well,
of
it does.
room.
At the front of the house is in their car parking spaces.
Well, there's plenty of room there.
Well, as long as there is plenty of room there.
Are you going to the next one? No.
Yeah,
Right.
that's existing, this is the building itself, it's, I haven't gone. You know,
No, the one with the yellow one. That's it.
it, stop there.
There's plenty of room.
So long as there is plenty of room there,
There's
no
plenty of
objection.
room. Well, we can put in a note to say, as long as we're happy that there's adequate parking.
Yeah, because they are
But it
definitely.
doesn't actually encroach on the parking, I don't think.
There's look, there's plenty of room there.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I like using SAT. They don't go in planning applications, they have to go on the SAT nav and stuff like that to try to give a better impression. Because architects and others have a tendency to, shall we say, not include certain things in their drawings. But you can see there's a car park there, can you see next to the trees?
Yeah.
And there's a wacky great drive at the side of there. There's no parking issue.
Is this a no objection from us?
For me, it's a,
Yeah, no objection.
right, next.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure whether we're now moving into Herne Road or back to the trees and
Right, now
Church
we're going
Street.
back to the trees.
Right.
Well, look, this is another one that there's no way I'm going to go through this in detail. I have done, but if you really want to know where the 558 horse chestnut, the 559 horse chestnut, the 562 sycamore, the 560 horse chestnut and the 565 elm and all that sort of stuff, I'm afraid they're not going to get it from me. Because people have been ages to work this one out.
Well, I think it's safe to say that Henry Pearson is on the case of this one, and it will be perfect.
No. All I tried to do there is show what a crown lift is. And on my 2 points are quite simple. There's no felling and it's tree husbandry. And it is, according to the arborologists, this is a good thing to do because it gives the tree more light, and of course it actually means that it doesn't interfere with people's rights of passage. That's it, really. I've had a look at this in quite a lot of detail actually, but I didn't want to complicate things hugely this evening. But because there's no felling, and because I believe it is tree husbandry, I don't know what else to say.
Well, our usual policy on tree husbandry is that it's not something that we would normally object to.
Well, we do the usual bit, don't we?
Subject to any contrary view of the...
Our tree
Well,
office.
that's cutting it down, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's unlikely that has a contrary view. But,
I'll tell you what, you want to see the maps of this, try and work them out. Oh, and all of a sudden, Strongman's flats came up. Strongman's flats. I thought, well, bloody hell, where did that come from?
Right.
Apologies for the language.
Let's move on to Herne Road.
Mr. 6 Herne Road. Right. So I'll just read that gently. Conversion of attic, replacement, sign, renewal, concert, and UPC dark grey. Well, actually, to be honest, I've never come across UPC dark grey. Have any of you?
Grey's the new fashionable colour, isn't it? Everybody
Is
wants
it?
Yeah, it's
Grey.
aluminium.
I haven't come across this one. I mean, UBC, for me, it's nearly always white, but this dark grey business is quite interesting. Anyway, look, it's a wacky great site. That's the proposed site plan. Don't know what else to say, really. I mean, nothing much changes, really, from the, from what you look at it from the road. It's just they're going to put some dormer windows in and fiddle about in the attic. There are just some applications that come across that go, well, you know, what on earth do we object to? And I have to say, from my perspective, this is not one I can think of a single thing that we would object to. Plenty more, plenty of parking space. They've got a garage as well. They just tidy it up.
Seems a classic no objection to me, unless anybody has
I had a good look at it as best I could. And I am trying to keep this nice and neat and tidy.
Right, I think we'll keep it nice and neat and tidy by saying no objection.
There we go. Look, if you want to see what it's going to look like, that's what it's going to look like. It's in a road that is appropriate for this type of dwelling. It's not like, for example, a certain property down Riverside.
Let's not stir it up anymore. We've got to move on.
No, I didn't want to get Councillor Cheshire on the go on this.
No objection.
But you know what? I hope you know what I mean.
I knew it before you even said it, Neville.
Well, thanks.
Right, let's move on.
Right.
Except that hopefully there are no more planning applications because there are none
And then
away.
we got next. Oh look,
The end.
the end.
Good.
Sign off.
Thank you.
There are some planning outcomes that are indicated, none of which were particularly surprising. There are no planning appeals. It seems to mean that with 5 minutes to go before 9 o'clock, I can swiftly move round and ask if anybody has any other matters relevant to planning. No. 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 Lisa, you've nothing else you want to bring to our attention? No. In which case,
That's it.